Okay, hi Andrew, thank you very much for seeing us today. You've just recently, last year, launched BrandiAggio.
Yeah.
And the great thing about that is you can really see messages from your marketing department that coincide with messages from HR. And how have you kind of got to that point where both of you are in line and saying the same thing, basically?
Yeah, it was a very deliberate exercise. When we went out to create the new employer brand, it was a fundamental principle of what we call BrandiAggio, that we weren't going to have an employer brand and a brand that represented the organisation. So right from the outset, we agreed what the key messages should be, and that's pulling in on all of our things like our values, our purpose, celebrating life every day, everywhere, and all the organisational messages that we wanted people to connect with, both as an employer, but actually also as an organisation as well.
And what are the benefits of the two functions working together? You know, I recently saw a study that said that they both HR and marketing want to collaborate more, but are finding it a bit difficult in different areas, you know.
Again, because it was an innovative project, I don't think we've necessarily come up against those kind of obstacles or barriers. It was a fundamental way of how we set BrandiAggio up. So Dom Redfern, who's our corporate relations director, who leads on BrandiAggio, plus my former boss, in terms of talent engagement, worked very collaboratively together in the early days of forming that model, I guess. And so we've never really had that organisational friction between the two functions, because it was wholly owned between talent engagement and corporate relations. And marketing was actually the function that kind of glued those two things together. So I think it's been very much seen as a way of enabling the messages to go out into the market.
And leadership in terms of the very top tier of the organisation, did they help sort of foster that as well?
The project was a strategic project, so it's been supported from Ivan Menezes, who's our CEO, right the way down, and it's become such an integral part. So BrandiAggio is such an integral part of everything we do, and everything that we present to the outside world.
Since you've launched BrandiAggio, obviously it's been nearly a year now. What kind of change in both those internal candidates and the external candidates have you seen in terms of the way they're receiving it?
It's been quite staggering. And by that I mean we've become a lot more visual in pretty much every single way. So we now have an amazing YouTube channel where we've combined careers information, but also marketing information, but also general information about the company. We're across LinkedIn in a huge way. We also now have broadened out to things like Instagram. So our digital footprint has become much bigger, but the messages we're able to put out there through the digital output is very consistent, and it is a lot more representative of who we are as a business today and where we want to go. So I think in terms of, to answer your question around how candidates see us, I think the internal candidates we're driving a sense of being much more proud of what we do and who we are, and external candidates wanting to drive a sense of, I want to work for Diageo, in a very authentic, truthful, honest way, and giving people insight into what it's actually like to work for Diageo.
Yeah. It's interesting you mentioned about sort of the digital expertise and things like that, because that was one of the things that came from this study, was that I think there was a perception that maybe HR doesn't necessarily embrace digital or have the understanding of social media and those kind of tools that can help both sides. So how would you, I guess, plug that gap?
I think it's just prevalent in the world we live in. You know, everything is moving towards digital, and therefore to ignore digital is kind of almost at your peril, whether it's at an organisational level or whether it's from an attraction level from a talent acquisition resourcing perspective. So we've really kind of built our platform with engaging with talent largely based on digital. So a lot of the routes to market that I've mentioned, so things like LinkedIn, Instagram, all of those channels, is designed predominantly to move us into a digital marketing space and a digital attraction space. So I think, to quote Ronan Dunn, who's the CEO of O2 in a recent presentation, if you haven't got a digital strategy, you haven't got a strategy. So therefore, I think we can take those words and be really clear that unless you've got a digital attraction strategy, you don't have an attraction strategy. So I think that's where we've tried to move to.
Yeah. Well, finally, if you were to, I guess, recommend to other businesses that maybe wanted to replicate some of the things you've been doing with BrandiAggio, what would your key advice be?
I think most of all, I think I would get senior sponsorship for this. It's been a big sort of ship to turn in the sense of what we've achieved, and I say we, it's a lot of people in the organisation who've contributed to this, but the benefits are almost too great that you could even measure them in that sense, because if you take that sort of principle of that we've talked about, marketing and recruitment, customers are candidates are customers. So I think that's a very powerful engagement message to have with your senior stakeholder audience, who may come at it from a marketing perspective thinking of people as consumers, and we come at it thinking of people as candidates. Actually, they're one in the same. So I think that whole kind of having a really strategic view of where you want to get to, who you want to engage with, and actually that they're one and the same, I think is what overcomes perhaps some of the senior level inertia that sometimes you can find within an organisation.
I agree. Brilliant. Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.